anytime you emphasize exhales, in other words, making them longer than your inhales, you are slowing the heart rate down, you're calming your system.
Huberman's video is an eye-opener to the physiological realities of stress. Many of us perceive stress as just feeling overwhelmed or anxious, but as Huberman explains, it's far more than that. It's a physical reaction, a survival mechanism encoded within our DNA that triggers specific responses in our body. While useful in threatening situations, these responses can become a problem if they're always on, eventually leading to a range of health problems. But the good news, as presented by Huberman, is that we can manage these reactions.
A few years ago, when my laboratory got interested in studying stress in humans, we asked ourselves, what are the patterns of breathing that allow for the most rapid reduction in stress levels? And more importantly, what are the patterns of breathing that can be done in real time so that people can adjust their stress while they're still engaging in life, right? Breathwork classes, running off to Esalen for a weekend is a magical experience, but life demands pressing on you. That's typically when you feel stress. So it is still true that vacation, long meditation retreats, and massages or a nice drink, if you're of drinking age, still work, but they're slow and they take you offline. The physiological sigh is a pattern of breathing that was actually discovered by physiologists in the 30s, and that was essentially rediscovered by Professor Jack Feldman at UCLA, a world expert in the neurobiology of respiration, and by my colleague Mark Krasnow at Stanford, who studies lung function. The physiological sigh is a pattern of breathing that we all engage in deep sleep when levels of carbon dioxide in our bloodstream get too high. We, or our dogs, you can see your dog do this, will do a double inhale followed by an extended exhale. Children or adults, for that matter, that are sobbing and lose their breath, so to speak, will also do a double inhale, exhale. That's the spontaneous execution of what we call the physiological sigh. The reason it works so well to relax us is because it offloads a lot of carbon dioxide all at once. And the way it works is the following. Our lungs are not just two big bags of air. We have all these little millions of sacs of air that if we were to lay them out flat, they would be as big as about a tennis court or so. The volume of air, therefore, and the volume of carbon dioxide that we can offload is tremendously high, except that we get stressed as carbon dioxide builds up on our bloodstream, and as kind of a double whammy, these little sacs deflate. Now, when we do a double inhale, so I'll do this now twice through my nose, or you could do this, or you could do it through your mouth, but it works best through the nose. It's inhale, and then you sneak a little bit more air in at the very end. When you do that, you reinflate those little sacs. And when you exhale, then you discard all the carbon dioxide at once. So the simple way to describe this protocol is that unless you are underwater, you do a double inhale followed by an extended exhale, and you offload the maximum amount of carbon dioxide. And we found in our laboratory, and other laboratories have found, that just 1, 2, or 3 of those physiological sighs brings your level of stress down very, very fast. And it's a tool that, you can use anytime. I do hope that people will kind of watch other people or dogs as they start to relax or go down to sleep. You'll see this pattern of breathing, but again, it can be consciously driven. The other thing about breathing, and the reason why exhales are so vital, is the following. I know there's a lot of interest nowadays in heart rate variability. Well, most people don't realize this, but your breathing is actually driving heart rate variability. So when you inhale, this dome-shaped muscle beneath your lungs, your diaphragm, actually moves down because the lungs expand, it moves down. When you do that, you create more space in the thoracic cavity, and the heart gets a little bigger, it actually expands. As a consequence, blood flows more slowly through that larger volume, and the brain quickly sends a signal down to the heart to speed the heart up. The short, simple version of this is inhales speed the heart up. When you exhale, the opposite is true. That dome-shaped muscle, the diaphragm, moves up. The space in your thoracic cavity gets a little bit smaller. The heart gets a little bit smaller. Blood moves more quickly through that small volume, and the brain sends a signal to the heart to slow the heart down. Physicians know this as respiratory sinus arrhythmia, but this is the basis of what we call HRV, heart rate variability. And the simple way to remember this is anytime you emphasize exhales, in other words, making them longer than your inhales, you are slowing the heart rate down, you're calming your system. Anytime you emphasize inhales, you make them more vigorous or longer than your exhales, you're speeding up your heart. Whether or not you get into a cold ice bath or a hot sauna so hot you want to get out, or you get hit square in the face with something over text that you really didn't want to hear or see, it's adrenaline. It's just adrenaline. And so your subjective readout of that and what it means is really important. If you agree with the following statement, which I do, anything that you do and experience, but especially stress, is the consequence of that thing and what you believe about that thing. And so if you consume a lot of information about the powers of stressful states to bring out your best, you will perform better. If you consume a lot of information about the power of stress to cripple you, you will perform worse. There's absolutely no question. The data are striking. And this is not growth mindset. This is just simply what do you believe about stress based on the dominant knowledge that you're consuming about it. So that's why it's fun to watch David Goggins, here we go again, David, or Jocko, or Joe, or someone or Cam Hanes, put out this information about, or Ryan Hall, who ran for Stanford and then now is into the powerlifting thing and running, and there are others too, of course. When you start to consume a lot of that information, it's not just inspiring, it actually changes your perception of what your own stressful states mean. You can actually get better from stress if you're in the ocean of knowledge that stress grows you. If you're living in the ocean of knowledge, I was thinking like a pool in the summer. You got the kiddie pool, the kids all peeing in it, presumably. You got the diving thing, you got the high dive and all that. If you believe that the experience of belly flopping off the high dive is going to make you a better diver, in some sense, at least in this analogy, it will. Whereas if you feel that it's just the most embarrassing thing ever and it's going to cripple your ability to get out in the dive in front of anybody ever again, well, you're right about that too. One thing that existed for a long time and I thought was total quackery is this thing called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, where some therapist named Francine Shapiro came up with this idea that if the patient would sit down in a chair and recount some trauma or some fear and move their eyes from side to side like this, that somehow they could move through it. And people would ask me about this stuff. They're like, you study vision, you study stress. And I was like, this stuff is crazy. It's quackery. Somebody made this up. They'd say, it coordinates the activity on the two sides of the brain. It mimics REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. I thought, this is nuts. And then I ate my words because in science, we review papers. We're sent papers. You have to review them and critique them anonymously. And I got a bunch of papers to review that were focused on eye movements, not on trauma or fear or anything like that. And what they saw in these papers is they observed that when we move our eyes from side to side, a brain area called the amygdala, which is involved in fear and threat detection, it's kind of universal neural real estate for fear, be alert, all the panicky stuff. That area was suppressed. And it turns out it makes sense because when you move forward through space, whether or not you're skateboarding, if it's self-generated motion, you're walking, you're running, you're cycling, you're skateboarding, as you move through space, the visual images are going by you like this, but you don't experience them as a blur. Just like if you took a picture on your phone and you moved your phone, it'd be blurry, but you have what are called image stabilizing eye reflexes. When you move your eyes from side to side, it mimics forward movement. And it seems that forward movement, or just moving your eyes from side to side, quiets the fear response. And this probably, and I don't know because I wasn't consulted at the design phase, but it probably is involved in our evolution of being able to move forward in the face of danger.